right. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, baseball community. Coach Bo here. We are going to get into part 2 today with our cold weather tips and strategies for wintertime and indoor training optimization discussion. I have 4 additional tips to go with last week's 4 tips. But before we get into that, quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," end quote. That's a well-known quote by Peter Drucker, the late Peter Drucker. Many of you have probably heard the name Peter Drucker. He was a management consultant, educator, author who had a lot of influence on the modern business world, specifically in the area of management and getting everybody towards the same goal, working together cohesively, the different levels of organizations running smoothly and synergistically. So I wanted to start today's podcast episode off with what I think is a solid quote when it comes to prioritizing what's most important. And I think when it comes to most things in life, and I'm sure most of you would agree, it's not just about consuming and taking in more information. Of course, taking in information, digesting it, whether that's reading, watching, listening, or the information we gather by doing, that of course is very important, and that's the first step. But as age and gray hairs have descended upon me, I'm at a point where I now prioritize the ability to prioritize at a much higher level in the hierarchy, at a much higher level in the process hierarchy. In other words, the older I get, the more I value the ability to prioritize information. So it goes from getting a high quantity of information coming in, different sources, learning from different people, different places, and then understanding the quality of that information, being able to vet it through experience, hearing enough of it, seeing enough of it, reading enough of it to start to connect dots, and then to go and implement it, test it out, try it out. And lastly, and I put this so high up, and that's why I stuck this quote by Peter Drucker at the very beginning of this podcast, the ability to prioritize and not go chase a million things or the shiny objects, but to prioritize and then execute on those priorities, to stick to it, to work the process. I think the problem with working the process for most coaches and people is that their process hasn't prioritized the right things. So with that said, we need to prioritize the right things first. And this quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," really outlines it, really highlights that culture, in Peter Drucker's eyes, is much more important than strategy. So team culture is more important than your first and third offense. Team culture is more important than perfecting the double steal. We could have great drills. We could have great talent. We can have all the best strategies. But if our team culture is chaotic, if it's volatile, if it has no direction, no positive direction, no synergy, the expectations haven't been upheld, and worst case scenario, the team culture is imploding, then none of that matters. Or should I say, it matters very little. So I love that quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Let's focus on creating a great team culture. And now I'm not saying we shouldn't get really good at the strategies. We just need to keep the things in the right order. I say keep the main thing the main thing. Let's keep our priorities in the right order. Plus, that makes it much easier when we're out there coaching to have a checklist of priorities. So you can right away know this one supersedes that. You can quickly assess what supersedes what. Adds clarity to most situations as a coach. Now, culture is, more specifically, it's how a team interacts with each other, with the coaching staff, how the coaching staff interacts, the practice environment, the energy level at practice, the level of hustle at practice, the vibe of practice, the eagerness for players to get to practice and want to be there, the tempo of practice, the coachability of players, how players interact with umpires and the other team, how players and how the team deals with failure, deals with errors, deals with mistakes, how the team leaves the field, leaves the dugout after the game. When they walk away, do they leave it better than how they found it? So team culture eats strategy for breakfast. Love that quote. Says a lot in 5 words. Now, moving on to the meat and Idaho potatoes of the episode. I woke up this morning. There was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. Everything was covered nicely, just really beautiful, but definitely not enough snow and not a cold enough day to slow down our lives. Just like this time of year for a lot of you, inclement weather, cold weather, lack of facilities, this shouldn't slow us down from getting our baseball work in, insofar as we're not burning out our players. Now, if you are in California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, you're already going pedal to the metal. All right, but this is for the rest of us who are in colder areas. Like here in Boise, the Little League doesn't start until the end of March, which is earlier than some of you. So don't be like the neighbor of mine who got on the community page this morning, the community Facebook page, and was begging for the schools to close for the day because there was 4 inches of snow on the ground. True story. Could you imagine somebody from like World War II coming out of the Ardennes forest reading that? Shut the schools down, 4 inches of snow. So we don't want to be like my neighbor. We want to look for solutions. We want to utilize this time, even with inclement weather, for those of us in those areas that are colder and snowier or rainier. Got to be creative. Next week, I'm going to share with you 2 specific examples of 2 practices that I was just at, 2 non-baseball facility places that were maximizing the baseball reps, quality reps. And I will discuss those 2 practices next week, what we can learn from them, what we can take from them. And I'm going to share tips out from seeing what I saw at these 2 different types of facilities. Facilities, like I said, not designed for baseball. I'll share out some great things I saw that I'm sure many of you can take and run with. Now, as we get into the 4 tips that I'm going to share today, the second set of 4, building off of last week's episode, I do think it's important that we, for those of you in colder weather states, for those of you still in off-season mode or early preseason mode or even preseason mode, I do think it's important to balance extra practices with burnout. And kids will be different. Players will be different. Some players want to go 7 days a week right now. Feel it out with your kid. Test it out. Don't be afraid to push your players a little bit. I think baseball players that haven't started their regular season yet, their practices like those warm weather states, they should be doing at least 1 training a week, if not a secondary training at home, a second day at home, or 2 of them at home, 2 training sessions, that is, at home per week. And we're getting pretty close to the time to be doing 3 a week, but those sessions could be as short as 30 minutes, 20 minutes, up to an hour. And I think that's the one recommendation in terms of time and volume that I will say. That is, I think it's better to spread it out a little bit more insofar as it's not a hassle to get to somewhere to train and set up the environment. If it's not a hassle to do that, I would break it into smaller bite-sized chunks and do it more frequently. So last week we talked about indoor batting practice, speed and agility training, lower body strength, and core strength training. This week's 4 tips are things that we can do right now that we can rep right now. First up, arm strength, getting our arm strength ready. Long toss might be hard right now. Might be hard to get some long toss in or consistent long toss, a full-on throwing routine, a full-on throwing program right now. It might be difficult due to the weather. It might be difficult due to time, but definitely there are some constraints for those colder weather areas right now. But we should be on-ramping process for our arms, for the player's arms right now. Here's a tip to get the arms, the shoulder area, the shoulder girdle stronger, specific to throwing a baseball. Get a couple of 1-pound plyo balls. They sell them on Amazon for $15. If your kid's muscles have developed, if your kid's stronger, junior high and strong or older, maybe 2-pound plyo balls. You don't need heavy weights for this. 1 to 2-pound plyo balls, or if you have some 1 to 2-pound dumbbells lying around, those will work. Although I like the plyo balls. It's like a soft PVC plastic with sand in the middle, and those work really well for a few different reasons. And simply running through some reps, some sets of quality arm circles, reverse arm circles, and forward arm circles. 20 reps, 30 reps, 40 reps, 50 reps, reverse and forward. That can really help to strengthen up the shoulder. I'm a big fan of forward and reverse arm circles for building up shoulder strength and shoulder stamina. Technique is important here. It should be a full range of motion arm circle, and the weight, of course, shouldn't be overbearing on the shoulder area. So I'm a big fan of arm circles. And now band work, elastic tubing and band work. I'm not as big a fan of that as I am with plyo ball work, but they should be a staple for baseball players. So getting band work in, elastic tubing in for shoulder stability, shoulder strength, shoulder mobility, etc. Next up, the pitching delivery for your pitchers, which at the youth level is most players do some amount of pitching or a lot of pitching. Pitchers should be repping their pitching delivery right now, even if it's on flat ground. Ideally off a mound, but flat ground would work too. They should do some shadow work, meaning the pitching delivery without a baseball, just repping through the delivery. Of course, the arm needs to be loose, even if they don't have a baseball and they're mimicking their throwing motion, specifically at full speed, their arm should be loose before letting it rip. They should mimic their pitching delivery as if they're pitching in a game. It should look identical to what it's going to look like out there on the field during a game. Eyes on the target, the same kind of tempo, and you could start with, for example, 5 reps where you break the mechanics, the delivery into certain parts, like the rocker step, that initial step, the leg lift. Some people call it a knee lift or a leg kick. I call it a leg lift. The leg lift, the stride, and then the finish, you could break it into those 4 parts and do 5 reps kind of broken up. I wouldn't do more than about 5 reps broken up like that because I think it's way more important for pitchers to do a fluid delivery all the way through from start to finish so that the kinetic chain gets a lot of reps working as it would during a regular game. A bonus tip here, if your players are ready to start throwing, get those bow nets out, those Champ Pro nets, an L screen, some kind of netting. Put a nice small target up or a few different targets up and let the pitchers throw into those targets. You can use an Incrediball for this or a foam core ball as long as it's the same size and the same weight. That's my recommendation. You could get pitching reps in without needing a catcher all dialed up with gear, and you could run that as a station. Tip number 3, get a whiteboard or a digital drawing board and show your players or your kid defensive rotations. It's like when a ball's hit the left field, down the left field line, runner at first. Where's the flow? Where do the defensive players go? On a bunt to a certain area, third base line, first base line. Who's coming to get it? Who's not? Who's getting the base? So draw out some of those common defensive rotations. This is a good time of year because you can do this in a living room. You can do this on a Zoom call. So discuss some of those key defensive rotations. Also, how a cutoff sequence would look on a ball into the gap and a play at home. How should the cutoffs line up? How should those positions line up to cut off? And then who's got the bases for those positions not involved in the cutoff and the relay? So relays should be drawn out. The key relays, how they should look. So that can be done on a whiteboard, a digital drawing board, or you could do it on paper and print out the pieces of paper. You could draw up 10 very common ones and then make copies and pass them out to the team and then discuss them. So defensive movement, good time of year to be talking about that. You can do that indoors and you don't need much space at all. Lastly, signs and signals. This time of year, signs and signals should at a minimum be organized. As a coach, you should organize your signs and signals, list them out, the signs and signals that you want to use for the coming season. And if you have time and access to your team, you can implement them, or at least those players that are there. You could rep them, practice those signs and signals so everybody's on the same page. I wouldn't wait for the day before the game or the practice before the game to go over signs and signals if you can help it. At a minimum right now, coaches can be outlining their signs and signals, their system. Shouldn't be too complex, shouldn't have a ton of them, but have those outlined for yourself at least so you're ready to implement them when you get the chance. So signs and signals. Tip number 4 for this time of year for those winter weather, those colder weather states. All right, so that's 8 plus a bonus, so 9 tips for this time of year that you can use to coach up your players, get your team going. And next week, I'm going to talk about 2 specific practices that I saw. And also, I have my top 5 coaching posts of the month. And I have a great article I came across about batting average. So we'll talk about that. I know there's a lot of batting average fans out there and the value of using batting average with our players. Most of you know where I stand with that, but this is a counter argument and I want to break it down with all of you next week. So I'm excited for that. All right, head over to 8020baseball.com. Get your free drill design guide. There's a dozen articles that are coaching specific articles to coach up your players, to get them better. There's 14 videos over there to help coach up your players. It's a lot of resources, more than enough to keep you busy right now, to up your game. Got an email this last week from a coach who's been using this stuff for the last 5 years. He's had a ton of success on a lot of different levels with this. And the age group there was 13 and 15. So big shout out to that coach reaching out. You know who you are. Love hearing from you guys. Email me, coachbo at 8020baseball.com, or do it through the website. If you want to learn more about my background, it's over there too on the About page. All right, until next week, let's take care of our health, especially this time of year. Seems like a lot of people getting sick. Let's take care of our health, getting our sleep, getting those vitamins, staying hydrated so we can be there for our family, there for our close friends, and be the great coaches that we want to be. Let's take this information out to wherever we can at this time of year, and let's put it into play. All right, everyone, y'all take care, and until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.